The doors to the room opened abruptly, nearly flying off their hinges, and a handsome young hero appeared on the threshold. The demon lord didn't look too surprised. She had been waiting for him to appear, which caused her to be madly excited and a burst of fun. They were clearly talking about different things, though both of them had planned this meeting, but it was one thing to plan and quite another to wait for the right moment, which was right now, the moment to end it all. When one speaks of a demon lord, one imagines violent confrontations, blood and other things from that area, but not a marriage proposal with a signed marriage contract. Here, an unfeeling hero did not expect such a thing. He would save the world and not this all. So the demoness received another refusal. No matter how the beauty from the lower world did not try, no matter what flowers and balloons did not bring, the answer was invariably negative. The hero did not understand why he should marry her. He, and without her, has an important purpose in life. Definitely, there was no doubt. The girl fell in love with him, went headlong into this feeling, and was sure that only brave people have good luck, so she would be brave to express her feelings. The demoness didn't understand what she was doing wrong, why Yukun was being so cruel to her after all. She wasn't bothering anyone with her love. Love is blind, and the demoness believed that the guy came to visit her because he missed her and wanted to see her. And even though the guy said that he was going to kill her, but this information went in one ear and out the other. And anyway, she wanted to spend time alone with Yukun, and for that she didn't care how many humans and non-humans she had to destroy. The hero had his own opinion on this matter. He was not going to let her, guided by one whim, to destroy the whole world. For this, his sword is ready to plunge into her heart, and his words were no joke. They had to be taken seriously, so the guy swung his sword. But today, death was not in his plans, so the girl broke the young hero's sword. On one hand, the demoness was glad that Yukun wanted to kill her, but on the other hand, she was sure that the time was not yet ripe for it. She was blushing and kept talking incoherently while the guy looked at the broken sword and didn't understand what to do now and how to kill his enemy with this. The girl was sure that after the destruction of the world, when only she and the hero remained on Earth, it would be possible to kill her. The meeting was over. The demoness suffered, for she did not get to marry her favorite hero today either. At least she was glad that this time she was lucky enough to get a chance to talk to the object of her desire. In addition, the demoness ordered her people to follow Yukun and take pictures of him for her. The servants discreetly photographed the boy and brought his photos to the mistress, which she examined and cherished. Suddenly, in one of the photos, the demoness noticed some girl next to Yukun. They were talking sweetly and even laughing together. This caused a wave of jealousy and the desire to kill. And the first victim was to be the brunette. Emma, the hero's childhood friend, how dare she snuggle up to the guy like that, and even laugh next to him. It was a shame that some Emma knew so much more about Yukun than the demoness. It was, in her opinion, unfair. Which means the servants have to drag the girl to the castle and then she can have an interrogation with predilections and learn all the secrets of her idol. It was a good move, and a few hours after the kidnapping, the hero himself came to the castle with his claims. He didn't understand what was going on here. Why Emma had to be kidnapped. After all, it wasn't her fault. The young man began to realize that this was about the selfishness of this demoness who wanted to know everything about him. And since that was the case, the guy was ready to challenge the girl and was glad she was willing to accept it. Only he drew the wrong conclusion, as the fight made no sense to her. After all, thanks to Emma, the demoness had gotten a virtual replica of the young hero. It was so amazing, and the guy let his guard down a bit as this copy looked too much like him. The whole point was that Yukun had Emma. They were friends and lived in the city together, and she has no one but the hero. And the only thing left for the demoness was to sit in the castle and wait for Yukun to return home to the castle. And to avoid getting bored, the girl decided to make herself a copy of Yukun to spend time with. The guy had no idea what kind of magic the girl was using, but it looked all too strange, and a chill ran down his spine. Except that the demoness didn't use any magic to do it. It was very real science. In addition, to make everything look much more realistic, Emma took part in the process of creation, but the girl is so tired that now she is resting. On the one hand, the guy was glad that his childhood friend was okay, but on the other hand, he was tired of the demoness dragging him into her games. Except it wasn't a game at all for the protagonist. By and large, the girl was looking for any means to draw the attention of the young hero. And then happened what the guy did not expect. The girl began to cry bitterly, as she loves the guy too much and he does this to her. Yukun tried to calm her down because it wasn't proper for a demon lord to cry like that. Besides, the guy felt that there was no need to make different copies of him when there was a real flesh and blood one. Oh, and he has a mission. He needs to kill the demoness, and until he does, he can't think of anyone but the girl. But from what she heard, the protagonist concluded that the guy loves her, so she offered the guy to remarry her, except that he wanted to kill her. It got more and more marvelous by the minute as Yukun pinned the girl against the wall, saying that it didn't matter to him whether she was human or demon. After all, he liked her a lot anyway. probably so much he wanted to kill her. And the moment his lips almost touched her ajar lips, the demoness backed up. Only, as they say, there was a mistake. And all this sweet ugliness turned out to be a banal dream, and the girl woke up as the obsession disappeared. Obviously, it couldn't go on like this, so she decided it was time to meet the young hero again. To cheer herself up somehow, Haru decided to go to Yukun's hometown, where everything reminded her of him. The first thing she decided to do was to buy up all the local delicacies and souvenirs that would remind her of her idol. Walking the streets of the city, a girl suddenly found a stone on which a guy once sat and cried. She was acting as weird as possible, taking pictures of a rock, wailing about something that people started squinting at her, realizing she was someone's raving fan. Suddenly, a young man approached her. He did not expect to see Hera in his city, and even for such a strange occupation. But the girl was not confused, and she once again offered him to marry her. But the guy again refused such a pleasure. Moreover, as always, when he met the demoness, he began to threaten her with his sword, thinking that it was time to end it all. They could not understand each other's desires. She did not understand why the guy rejects her. He did not understand why she every time starts talking about marriage. Still, in real life, the girl loved the guy more than anything else in the world. He was the best and the only one for her. Nor did the young hero believe in the love of the girl, nor did he believe that she came to his city to fly in the clouds and talk about all sorts of nonsense. There was no way Haru could forget about her dream, and kept saying things that the guy didn't understand. But what he understood perfectly was that if the demon lord was in the city, she was going to attack him. But that was not why she had come here. For her, coming to the hometown of her beloved was akin to a pilgrimage to the land of the progenitor. It sounded strange and implausible, and she couldn't have come to town just to go for a walk. It didn't usually sound like much, as she had done a lot of prep work, deleted photos from the gallery on her phone, and put together a guide to interesting places. And to create a sense of the guy's presence, she took a small plush figurine of the young man with her. This toy was unusual, and with Yukun's voice built in, and could play a recording of his voice from time to time. And overall, the guy shouldn't be picking on her after all. She had a legitimate day off that she wanted to spend at her pleasure, even if he thinks demon lords can't have days off. It's hard to say what made Yukun angry this time, but he started chasing the main character away, saying it was time for her to go home. Haru didn't want to leave after all. She spent almost all her time in the castle, so almost no one knows her by sight, so there won't be any problems. Although the guy thought that if anyone found out she was here, there would be panic. She didn't want to leave because she had dreamed of this day for so long, prepared for it so meticulously, thought of everything so that no one would know that she was a demon lord. Tears came to her eyes, for the girl had done nothing wrong, and just wanted to look at the city where her favorite person lived. And actually, she was just planning to find the guy's house and find out what kind of laundry conditioner he uses. There's nothing wrong with that, just normal interest. Just all such actions were as strange as possible. Besides, you can't go to other people's houses without the owner's permission. But the girl didn't understand it. Nevertheless, chasing her away no more. Yukun wasn't going to chase her away. But the girl must behave herself. Don't hurt anyone, don't harm anyone. And don't forget about disguises. No one must know who she really is. More importantly, the rest of the day she has to be in his sight so the guy can control the situation. The weekend was over, and so was the idol between the main characters, and the guy came to the Demon Lord's dungeon again. Luck should be on his side today, which means he can defeat the demoness in battle. Only he would have to do it alone, as his friend was not going to participate in this, and would prefer to spend the evening in more pleasant company. The young man thought the protagonist was a bit bored and wanted someone to keep him company on his trek to the castle, but he wasn't going to do that. Moreover, it seemed to the guy that Yukun came here to propose to Demoness, or at least confess his feelings, and in order for her to believe him, it must be done sincerely, although the protagonist said that he came here for another purpose, namely, to kill the girl. Nevertheless, Yukun persuaded his friend to go along with him, and now the two of them were already at the Demoness castle, but so far she was nowhere to be seen. And it wasn't until a few minutes later that she came running to them, apologizing for being a little late. She felt very bad about making the young man wait for her, so she apologized for the 100th time for that. She was worried about the fact that she couldn't style her hair for a long time since it was high humidity today, making it difficult, but Yukun didn't care about that, which he shamelessly reported. She was very much annoyed because any girl in front of her lover wants to look as beautiful and sweet as possible. But for the young man was more important that she was a demon lord, the girl he saw in her in the last place. At this moment, the main character's friend turned his attention to the demon lord, not expecting it to be her. Unlike his friend, the other character looked more relaxed. In addition, he briefly walked up to the darkness lord, kissed her hand, and gave her many compliments, as he had no idea until that moment that the darkness lord was such a beautiful woman. Yukun had not expected such behavior from his friend, because he only saw the demoness as his enemy, not as a lover or even a girlfriend. But his friend was of a different opinion. It seemed to him that it was necessary to be as courteous as possible with such a beautiful lady. Moreover, the new acquaintance would be happy if the demon lord reciprocated him and became his girlfriend. The girl was not used to such a kind and attentive attitude, so the words of the new acquaintance embarrassed her very much, and she did not know how to react to them properly, causing a burst of silence from the guys. Yukun's friend was a bit surprised because he thought that the girl was not lacking in male attention, and she had long been accustomed to such displays of politeness and courtesy, but in fact, things were quite different for her. However, she pulled herself together and said that she had Yuziro-kun, which meant she didn't need anyone else. The new acquaintance was a little offended by this, but nevertheless, he was not very upset and tried to touch the girl because she was blushing so hard and sweetly. And at that moment, for the first time in their entire acquaintance, the young hero was jealous of the demon lord for his friend, closed her with him, and intercepted the guy's hand, preventing him from touching the girl. Only he didn't realize that he was feeling jealousy, so he masked it behind his foolish principles because he thought that she could attack her friend at any moment, and he couldn't do anything. But even such a reaction and behavior of Yukun did not sadden the demon lord. She did not give up hope that one day she will reach the cold heart of the young hero. After all, she loves him so much, and if ever she thought of looking at someone else with loving eyes, the guy can kill her on the spot for such a betrayal. Except that Yukun was already going to kill the demoness, so he asked Ada to take an active part in it, even though his friend didn't really want to participate in such an event. Nevertheless, Ada decided to help his friend. Even though he didn't share his outlook on life, it turned out he was quite a talented mage, so he began to read spells. But the young mage directed his introductory attack not at the girl, but at his friend, so a few moments later, Yukun stood wet to the skin. In truth, Ada did it deliberately, for he didn't want to attack the demon lord and harm her. Surprisingly, Ada's attack did work on the demon lord. She fell to the floor, and it was obvious that her nose was bleeding. But the reason was different. She saw a wet Yukun, which was the limit of her imagination. The girl did not expect that someone would be able to reveal her little weakness, because if you looked closely at the main character, you could notice how beautifully his wet hair lay on his forehead, how the drops of water glistened in the sun that broke through the windows. True, no one else appreciated it, so the heroes did not think long and decided to consolidate the result and attack Demoness again. But this time, Ada had to cover Yukun. For this, he created a vortex of air around him, which was supposed to protect him. But this time, too, something went wrong, and instead of injuring the girl, it was Yukun who was hurt again. He was now both wet and battered. Such a show could not help but affect the demon lord. She was simply disarmed by such a sight of her idol, for he was enchantingly good, and she could not take one look away, recognizing her total defeat. But this battle also passed rather quickly, and the heroes left to their own place. And the demon lord stayed in her castle. She hadn't seen her idol for quite a long time already, so she was insanely worried, ate reluctantly, and became depressed. The last time Yukun came to her castle was 2 weeks ago, so now she missed him madly and didn't know when they could see each other again. Even to find out what happened to Yukun and why he did not come to her for so long, the girl turned to his childhood friend, who reported that the guy went to a neighboring town on business. But the separation was so grievous to her that it seemed to her that she could not live another day without a dose of Yukun and would die like a fish without water. But there was nothing to do and nothing to want to do. She didn't want to eat, she didn't want to drink, she didn't want to talk. She didn't finish the delicious food prepared by the servants, thanked them, and went to her room. The demon lord's servants noticed that their mistress looked very tired lately, and one of the young men had an idea to help his mistress who was suffering so much. It was his duty as the demon lord's vassal to help her in any way he could, so to do so, he ordered all the demons to be summoned. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in her room, covered herself with a blanket, hugging her pillow and almost crying as a severe depression came over her. Suddenly, someone knocked at her door, and the girl reluctantly got up from her cozy bed, went to the door and opened it. But she did not expect to see that one of her servants would put on the mask of her idol, and in this form come to visit her. It was an unexpected turn of events, and Demoness for a few minutes even a little confused because she first thought that in front of her stands her idol. But it turned out that it was not so, moreover, and the other servants put on masks Yukun. Meanwhile, Yukun and his friend Ata were in a neighboring town where they had gone to get an unprecedented weapon, only it happened that this weapon had to be planned in advance, so the guys were now in an unloaded state, as no one was going to give them the item without armor. Moreover, only now Yukun began to realize that his friend had brought him to this city not for the sake of weapons and had kept him here for a rather trivial reason. The guy wanted to have a good rest together with his friend, to walk around and see the sights, thus organizing a mini vacation. And so, to somehow improve his mood, the young hero came to the castle of the demon lord, going to attack her from behind, coming in from the back door. But suddenly to himself he heard strange noises coming from one window in the castle, so the lad went over to it to look and listen to what was going on inside. But in no way did he expect to see that he would be in the room, or rather not him, but the people who put on masks with his image and came to the room to the demoness. Another stray thought came into his head, that the girl was conducting some dark ritual and was going to curse him in such an uncomplicated way. Demons were well aware that even wearing masks, they will not replace their mistress of a real young hero, but nevertheless in this way they tried to at least a little bit to improve her mood, although they realized that most likely they will not succeed. The demoness then reached into her mistress' headphones and turned on an audio recording in which someone with the voice of her idol was speaking words of love to her. They were phrases created from fragments of the hero's voice that had been trimmed and glued together, meaning there was a crystallization of the wisdom of the demon lord's army, a unique recording of the hero's voice for the beautiful mistress. The audio track was so smooth, so well done, that the main character felt like Yukun was talking to her in real time. Moreover, you could enjoy the live version with stereophonic sound, that is, the solo performance of the main character for the protagonist. In addition, the servants had prepared random hero degurati, which were made by retaking new photos from hidden cameras and processing them anew. There were 400 of them in total, and all for the beautiful mistress. But the most wonderful thing was that one of the servants was given a special picture, that is, a snapshot of the hero as a child, which was given to him by the boy's childhood friend. It was the most beautiful gift of all possible, and the demoness was so amazed by the ingenuity and love of her servants that she realized they were holding a secret weapon that could strike her to the core. But the surprises and gifts didn't end there. The servants had also prepared onigiri for their mistress, which Yukun had prepared for her with his own hands, but how they got them was a big question. Yes, these onigiri may not have been prepared by the young hero's own hand, but the servants analyzed the young man's character and habits, the brand of rice as well as its temperature, humidity, and luster level. They researched every possible factor in order to create this meal. After hearing all these explanations, the girl didn't listen any further than her servants, who were telling her about some of the dish's shortcomings. She immediately started eating it, as she thought that the slightly brackish taste said that this was exactly the kind of onigiri her idol would make. But even as she realized that it wasn't really her kun's cooking, she ate the treat with gusto, crying and eating as she hadn't had a crumb in her mouth in far too long. When the servants saw the lady begin to eat and smile, they took off their masks. They were happy to see her in good spirits and disposition, for they thought the smile suited her well. Some time passed and the protagonist called Ata to visit, because she wanted to make the protagonist somehow start smiling. For this, she needed his friend's advice, because basically, the main character walks around with a stony expression all the time. But when she was walking in the city and met a young man there, she saw that he could smile, and he smiled at other girls, so she was bitten by the snake of jealousy. So she wanted very badly for Yukun to smile at her at least once in her life, in the same way he smiled at other girls. She certainly thought about destroying everyone, and then she would be alone together with Yukun, but on the other hand, she realized that maybe she should try to cheer him up in some way so that he would start smiling. Truth be told, Ada had been a little surprised when he received the invitation to come to the Demon Lord's castle, and now, hearing the girl's request, he was no less surprised, but nevertheless he was willing to help her in any way he could in this difficult endeavor. The demoness realized that this guy spent the most time with her idol, so she wondered under what conditions the protagonist was smiling. Ada thought for a bit, but remembering all the situations when he talked to his friend, it seemed to him that the main character was always smiling and always in good spirits, not realizing that that was far from smiling cheerfully. Nevertheless, putting all that aside, the magician suggested that demoness give the young man some kind of gift, because everyone likes to receive gifts, and the guy was probably no exception fixed. It was definitely a great idea, but the girl was worried that she didn't know what to give the young man, but Ada assured her that her idol was a very understanding guy in that regard. So whatever she gave him, he wouldn't throw it in her face, but would accept it with gratitude. It still made the girl a little tense because she had never given anyone gifts, and decided that it might be appropriate to give the main character a whole country, because one of her adventurers had just conquered a small country, and she was ready to give it to her lover. Moreover, the demon lord was even ready to wrap it, the country, in gift wrapping and tie a ribbon, tying a bow on top, and only then hand it to the protagonist, not realizing that this is a little too much, except that the gift of an entire country won't bring her idol one bit of joy. But the guy will be happy if someone gives him a good quality gun. It was a more than wonderful idea that suited Demoness. She was ready to start making the sword right now. She just needed to find out which design would suit her lover better. But this was not exactly what the mage meant either. Although the girl realized that in principle the idea of the gift was good, But the question was also not only that she could not decide what to give, but also that the young man could accept nothing at all from her hands, not realizing that it did not come from the depths of her soul. At this point, the young man's friend realized that he probably doesn't smile at the sight of the girl because she is a demon lord, and the guy's brain switches automatically into battle mode, and he forgets that there is a smile. And since that was the case, it was necessary to act with cunning and determination, so the young man helped the demoness disguise herself as an ordinary girl. Now, if someone saw her in the crowd, they would never guess that she was a demon lord, so she looked like a real person that it was difficult to doubt her. The boy was sure that if the demoness communicated with the young hero like this, he would soften and be able to listen and accept her sincere feelings. And unlike Yukun, the mage was quite content to spend time with the girl now. He was quite pleased to help her with the situation. Plus, he realized that if he liked a girl as sweet and beautiful as the demoness, he would be the happiest man on the planet and would be smiling all the time. The demoness couldn't hold back a smile and hide the blush on her cheeks, for she was insanely happy that it was Ada-kun who was now by her side and helping her with everything. Her smile and sincerity penetrated right into the young mage's heart. In that moment, he realized how extremely lucky Yukun was, and how much he didn't realize his happiness. But as soon as the demon lord got close to Yukun, she immediately started screaming, worried and not understanding what she was doing here. Ada-kun watched all of this from the sidelines, hiding behind the wall. He didn't expect his friend to declassify the girl so quickly. She tried for the 100th time to convey her feelings to Yukun, assuring him that she wasn't a demon lord at all, but an ordinary girl who was crazy about him. Once again, Yukun never realized that the girl was completely pure and sincere in her intentions towards him. He believed that she was up to something again and ready to destroy this beautiful city. So he wielded his blade, preparing to deal her a fatal blow. But then the unexpected happened. When the girl tried to get a little closer to her idol, she tripped and fell, and at the same time dropped everything she had brought with her. The protagonist didn't understand what the girl was doing right now and what she had scattered on the ground in general. It turned out that it was all gifts for her idol, that is, for Yukun. The demoness had brought with her selections of ham, gifts from one rather curious festival, and a pile of fan mail on her behalf to a young man. But that wasn't all. The demoness had an ace up her sleeve, namely a sword she had forged herself, which she tied with a red ribbon and tied a bow on top. By and large, Yukun liked the sword, as it was quite well made. But there was no way the guy expected the demon lord to be in the business of forging swords by hand, and then also adding hand engraving to it. It was as strange as possible, nevertheless. Although it caused 1,001 questions in the protagonist's mind, he could not hold back a joyful smile. Seeing that her idol was smiling, the girl promised to make shields with the name of the main character and give them to him, although the guy started to refuse. The demoness was insanely happy to see Yukun finally smile at her sincerely. It was something she had wanted and longed for so much. She was so moved that she wanted to hug and kiss the young man, but he was opposed and recoiled, asking her not to molest him ever again. Some time passed, and Yukun went to one of the dungeons to hunt for a demon, but no matter how much he went forward, he never met one, although he realized that if he went further, he would definitely meet at least one, and he needed to pump up his skills by all means. Involuntarily, he remembered the image of the demon lord and thought that he needed to become stronger in order to kill her. Although the girl did not show any inherent aggression, on the contrary, she was happy to see him every time he came, saying that she would wait for him as long as it took. Second, the protagonist realized that the main character was behind his back, and once again he wanted to kill her insanely badly, even though the girl just wanted him to look at her. She learned from her servants that a young man was going to go to this dungeon to pump his skills, so she dropped all her business and came here as well to see how he would do it. It was hard for the young hero to believe that the demoness had come to the dungeon to support him morally and perhaps even physically, although she really only wanted to watch and give him as much moral support as she could. But as soon as they were a little closer to each other, the floor beneath their feet collapsed and the boy and girl began to fall rapidly downward. The demoness was the first to come to her senses and started trying with all her might to stomp on the young man, as he did not come to his senses for a long time, and started to scare her a little. She even wanted to give him artificial respiration on such an occasion. Only that didn't fly, as the young man came to his senses pretty quickly after her words, and wouldn't allow himself to be kissed under the pretense of CPR. Moreover, the guy thought that it was the girl who almost killed him, but in fact she had nothing to do with it, and was madly glad that he was alright. Yukun began to look around the room and realized that they had fallen into a trivial trap, and had fallen from quite a height downwards. Good thing their arms and legs were still intact. The young man realized that he couldn't get out of the trap by himself, as he didn't have magical powers like his friend, and he couldn't climb up the wall like Spider-Man either. There was nothing to do and had to seek help from the demon lord, who basically had to be able to use magic. The young man asked the girl to try and lift them into the air with her magic. Only this time there was a small problem, as the demon lord's magic had suddenly run out, and there was nothing she could do. To tell the truth, it turned out that last night the girl wanted to watch a movie very badly, but watching it on a small screen was not expedient, and she used her magic to enlarge the screen to the whole wall and watched movies until the morning, and so now her magic reserve was depleted. This situation annoyed Yukun insanely much, so he decided to find his own way out of this unforeseen situation. Except that the demon lord did not want to let the young hero go, because she was afraid that a demon could suddenly appear in the dungeon, and this despite the fact that she was in charge of them all. But it turns out that the girl herself did not like it when unexpectedly piqued superiors, and did not want to be hated by her subordinates for an unexpected visit. The two of them had been wandering around the dungeon for hours, but the problem was that they couldn't find their way out of the maze of passages. It was obvious that there was no one else in the dungeon besides them, so calling for help was extremely useless, which meant that they needed to spend the night here alone. The demoness's imagination began to immediately throw up interesting pictures, since she was in love with him after all. So she was confused by the idea of spending the night alone together in a closed room with the object of her adoration. But nevertheless, she began to worry a great deal about how she would look while she slept, and whether the young man would think her too strange, for quite often she would toss and turn in her sleep in her castle. But all her hopes were dashed because she had to stay where she was and sleep where she stood, and the young man was going to go a little further and stay there for the night. The young hero was not going to sleep next to the demon lord, as he realized that it could be a deadly and very dangerous event for him, because he had no idea what she could do to him. But Demoness wasn't going to do anything criminal, she just wanted to hold hands with her cummerbund while she slept. But apparently that wasn't going to happen either. Nevertheless, she had not given up hope that if she asked the young man to take pity on her just a little, if she swore that she would love him for better or for worse, support him in everything, and not do anything strange, he would allow her to be near him for a little while. The girl completely wilted, and clutching her pillow began to compose all sorts of nonsense. So the young man interrupted her abruptly and agreed. He was willing to sleep next to her, but he put his sword between them and warned her that if she somehow magically crossed that line, he would be sure to kill her. The girl certainly decided to take advantage of such a tempting offer, and sat next to her cummerbund while looking insanely happy. Moreover, she offered the protagonist to lie down on her lap if he suddenly felt tired and sleepy, but his sharp refusal led the girl to the idea that the young man has insomnia. And then she suggested the guy to count something. She, for example, constantly, when she cannot sleep, begins to count heroes, but you need to count at least to 10, then there will be some effect. In a few minutes, the girl was already sweetly asleep, but she was dreaming some rather strange dream where the hero was being attacked by asparagus. But the hero himself was strange that the demon lord was sleeping next to him, because he had never heard or read about anything like that before. And the next moment, a completely inexplicable phenomenon happened. The demon lord leaned her head on the hero's shoulder out of fatigue. And then the girl started crying, grabbing onto him and begging him not to leave because she loves him so much. And further, she began to dream another strange dream, in which the hero was chased by a whole herd of avocados on legs. She was grabbing for him, asking him not to leave, because there was danger ahead, and the young man began to realize how noisy this girl was. He took off his cloak and covered the girl with it, as it was quite cold in the dungeon. So passed the whole night, and in the morning the subordinates of the demon lord came to take their mistress from the dungeon, because they were very worried about her safety and security. In the castle, life went on as it always had, the subordinates taking care of their mistress and preparing delicious food for her. This time she had delicious pancakes in front of her with added ice cream sundae. It was the best decision for the main character. Suddenly another on-demon entered the dining room, bringing rather interesting news, though he wasn't entirely sure what was really going on. It was another of the main character's subordinates, and he decided to discuss some important business matters with her. The other employees of the castle were a bit surprised as they don't often get visitors. This competent demon with glasses was one of the commanders of the demon army who lead the troops outside the castle. Often this young man comes to the castle to report on the state of affairs outside the castle walls, but today's visit was an extreme surprise to all. It turned out that they had gotten word to Kalik that the demon lord had recently spent the night with the hero in one of the dungeons on the west side. The demon lord began to deny it passionately, for how could she sleep next to a real hero? Such a thing simply could not happen. Commander Selleck knew everything perfectly well without her confirmation or denial, for one of his subordinates had taken a very interesting photo that showed the hero and the demon lord side by side in a dungeon. The warlord was very curious whether the demon lord was ready to bear her sword and fight the hero, because she must finally realize that the head of all demons, she is the basis of their fighting spirit, and if any of them doubted her strength and sanity, every single one of them would turn away from her, and she would become just another and the most ordinary demon. Thus, she is either unwilling to willingly fight the hero, or she lacks the strength and skills to do so, which means she is unworthy of being the lord of all demons. Except that not all demons were of the same opinion. Those who served her in the castle, on the contrary, became on the defense of their mistress, and were ready to defend her even from one of the strongest commanders of the army of demons. Selik, on the other hand, believed that one of the demon lord's aides was also to blame for the situation. Moreover, the colonel was not going to leave the castle until he saw with his own eyes the battle between the demon lord and the hero. The girl tried to talk the warlord out of the idea, for no one knew if the hero would come to the castle today to kill her. And at that moment, Yukun's voice suddenly sounded. The girl did not really want to fight with the object of her adoration, but Selik looked at her in such a way that she felt uncomfortable under his heavy gaze, because the demon was not going to go anywhere, but on the contrary will closely watch her every word and action. The demon lord's mood was slowly creeping down. She didn't know how to be because she couldn't let her people down, and she didn't want to fight Yukon herself. Nevertheless, she came out to him with her head down. The guy just turned around at her footsteps. It seemed to him that this time she was walking towards him for quite a long time. As usual, in his favorite manner, he began to talk about how today was the day he would kill her. But suddenly the girl interrupted him abruptly. Except today she was in a completely different mood. Today she was going to completely end it once and for all, so it was the hero who needed to be well prepared. A storm of conflicting emotions erupted in her soul, because she didn't want to say all these nasty things to her idol, but she couldn't do otherwise. She was well aware that her commander would not buy a shoddy fight, so she had to give her best today, but she had to hold herself back. She wanted to burst into tears right here, right now in front of everyone, but she couldn't allow herself that weakness. In an hour, she was obliged to behave like a true demon lord, for Selik was watching her, and that was the only way she could get the warlord to leave. The girl allowed the hero to strike first, which he did, nevertheless noticing that it was as if she had been switched today. The young hero leaned into the demoness a little too close, making her blush with displacement, for all she could do was stare at the beautiful hue of his skin, his thin lips, and think of all sorts of interesting things. But the girl had no right to be distracted from the fight because Selik was watching her carefully, as if trying to find a trick in her actions, like an inspector trying to find a fault in the system. At one point, the girl noticed that the young hero looks at her as if he had an unfaithful wife in front of him. The matter was different. It seemed to him that the girl in front of him was a distraction, and the demon lord wanted to distract him in this way, preparing to strike from behind. Moreover, he grabbed the girl by the shoulders, began to shake her, demanding that she return the real demon lord. Demoness did not want the young hero of her vacation, but realized that if she did not answer him anything, and no reaction to such a prank, with Kelik suspected something wrong and will intervene in the fight. Suddenly, she had the brilliant idea to move the young man to a place where the warlord would not see them. So, there was not a moment to lose. She had to act quickly. After a moment, she did move the young man in an unknown direction. But as she moved, it happened that she toppled the guy to the floor and hovered over him. Yukun didn't realize what had happened, and in general, the situation seemed quite savory and unusual. And yes, the hair was nice to touch. Meanwhile, the warlord realized that something really weird was going on with the demon lord, and it was obvious that she was completely unwilling to fight the hero. And then there was another movement, in consequence of which the girl and the boy were again in the same room as they had been before. Smoke developed, and Selik ran up to her. Only he didn't expect to see the demoness hovering over the hero's motionless body, blood streaming from her nose. The warlord thought that it was an overwhelming energy that denoted the demon lord's bloodthirstiness, so he apologized to her sincerely for her recent words and behavior. He realized that only a hero and a demon lord sitting down in battle, capable of awakening such a monstrous aura, he had no place here. He recognized the power of the demoness and was ready to leave the palace with a clear conscience, asking her to continue to guide all demons with her great power. Now the demon lord could exhale calmly. She did not understand how she managed to cope with the situation, but she was proud of herself. Meanwhile, the young hero asked her to wipe the blood and let him go. A new day came, and the demoness started doing her usual thing, taking cute pictures of Yukin's merch. She was insanely happy that she was able to get out into the city. This was where her idol lived, and she loved breathing the same air with him. She even tried a slight hope that she would be able to meet a young man somewhere in the city. At that moment, an unknown man approached her and responded to her. This unknown turned out to be a human girl well known to the demoness, who was a childhood friend of her idol. Emma had no idea that the demon lord would want to walk the streets of the city, so she was a little surprised but happy to see her, and she had already bought up and was about to go home. At that moment, Emma noticed that the main character had torn the sleeve of her sweater, and if the girl hadn't pointed it out, the domainer wouldn't have noticed the hole, as she was so engrossed in taking pictures that she didn't pay attention to such trifles. To tell the truth, the demon lord was very upset, because she was madly in love with this sweater, so Emma had an idea, and she decided to invite the demoness to her home. She lived just around the corner. In general, the demon lord did not want to inconvenience Emma, But the childhood friend of the protagonist of Druga turned the conversation a little in another direction. She realized that most likely the girl came to the city in order to meet with a young man. The protagonist could not hide the fact that she really would like to meet a young man, but she has no idea where he is now, so she decided to just walk around the city. It was quite interesting, so Emma offered to check if Yukun was home now, since they lived in the neighborhood and it wouldn't be a big deal. Such news on the one hand drove the demoness into a state of panic, but on the other hand she was madly happy that she could see the house of his idol, and in general to live near him, in her opinion, was the greatest good. And then she felt sad, because she realized that Emma and Yukun wished each other good morning every morning, and had dinner together, and then discussed some interesting book, and at night they waved goodbye to each other on the balcony. But the boy and the girl never did that, and never spent the whole day on the balcony. Emma looked up at her neighbor's balcony, realizing that her friend probably hadn't come home yet. At this moment, the fetus demon lord turned her attention to the pictures that hung on the wall. She was curious as to who was depicted in them. They were old photos. Some of them even showed Yukun looking really cute. But all the main character's attention was drawn to just one most interesting photo, and she wanted to know what it was. It turned out that this picture was of a very young man, and he was being chased by a stray dog at the time. In the next picture, the boy was already 5 years old and was again being chased by a dog. In the next picture, he was 7 years old and was again being chased by a stray dog that was trying to grab him or pull him to the ground. By and large, the protagonist enjoyed looking at pictures of the little protagonist, and then Emma pointed out a small mark on the wall that the boy had left as a child when he played in this room. Even such a small thing seemed something special to the demoness, as everything related to the young man was insanely important to her, and she even wanted to hang a frame around this mark, as if it were a masterpiece of world significance. Besides that, Emma had something else very interesting, because she has a younger brother and the main character used to give her stuff that she grew up with to her little brother. Yes, it was a blow below the belt. Past such a demoness could not pass by. She was ready to create a real exhibition of all these things, although Emma was against such a thing. This was not the end. Emma had something else that was probably the most interesting, namely a video from the young hero's childhood, which they had to watch together. The demon lord had not had such a wonderful time in a long time. She was ready to take Emma with her, or at least become friends with her, because everything was so wonderful that she could not put it into words. She was so happy that she could see the main character doing all sorts of things at different ages, so she didn't know how to thank the girl for such a gift of fate. Except Emma was having a great time today too, so she thanked the demoness for keeping her company. Meanwhile, the light in the main character's house had just come on. The demon lord turned around to look. It was a real holiday for the demoness. She first saw live her idol in home clothes, for this could be, and God's soul to give. She jumped out onto the balcony and started waving to the young man and wishing him a good evening and generally rejoicing that he had come home in good health. Except that the girls didn't turn on the lights, so it was too dark for the protagonist to realize that it wasn't Emma waving at him, but the demon lord. So he briefly decided to wave back at her just in case, just so the girl wouldn't take offense. The uncomplicated movement caused in the soul of the protagonist rapturous emotions, so she lost consciousness from their overabundance, and the protagonist could not understand what was happening in the house and his best friend. After that night, the demon lord decided she needed to recharge a bit, so she decided to go on vacation to a hot spring. She realized that the bath at the castle was nice, but the hot springs were something else entirely. There was no one else here. It felt like she was at a private resort. Next on the plan, she and her subordinates had a game of ping pong. But before that, the demoness decided to eat ice cream. But when she entered the room, she saw a man and apologized to him, thinking she had gotten the wrong door. Except that person turned out to be none other than Yukun, which is not to say fate is fate. Demoness admitted that she had a little vacation, so she came to the hot springs, but she could not understand what the hero was doing here. It turned out that he also came here to the hot springs for the purpose of relaxation. This state of affairs did not like the young man very much, so he decided to return home, as he could not rest next to the demon lord. The girl tried to stop him, realizing that he had come a very long way to be here, so it was possible to stay and rest. But the guy, being a hero, could not relax when the demon lord was next to him. He was about to leave, but the demoness wasn't going to back down. She grabbed hold of his clothes and tried to stop the guy, even though he intended to leave despite her best efforts. At that moment, Otto walked into the room, who was slightly puzzled by the noise he heard coming from the room. But it would be weird if he caught the couple together, so they decided to hide without thinking about the fact that they would be touching different body parts in the tight space. The guy and the girl silently blamed each other for the situation. The guy thought that she was to blame for everything, as she did not want to leave for good and clung to him. The young hero realized that it was his own fault that he decided to hide, and dragged the demoness with him. But it would be worse if a friend saw them together and made the wrong conclusions. Yukun envisioned his friend starting to match him up with the demon lord again, figuring his life would definitely end then. And since that was the case, we should hide to the last. So he pressed the girl even harder against the wall and asked her to stand quietly and not make a single sound. Meanwhile, a thought process also started in the girl's head, but about being in a close space with her idol and even being able to feel his breath on her skin. At that very moment, a great rumbling sounded in the room, and Atto took notice of it, though he had been sure up to that moment that no one was in the room and that his friend had gone to the baths. It was definitely the setup of the century, as the demoness couldn't sit still when the young man was so close to her, which was why her leg stopped holding her up, causing a wave of anger from the guy. Yukun tried to pretend that he was just looking around the room, but Atto took it upon himself to tear him away from such a fascinating activity, though he was in no hurry to open the door. This was odd, as the mage doubted anyone would leave money or valuables in such a room, so he didn't see the need to inspect it either. And if so, then maybe Yukun had broken something in the room, like some kind of jar, since the mage had heard such a rumble. But the guy hadn't done anything like that. But if this option was also bypassed, Atto assumed that the friend hid in the next room to scare him, which meant that next time the mage would hide, and the hero would count to 10 and then look for him. But this assumption was also bypassed. But the noise from behind the door was getting stronger and stronger, which made Atto's curiosity more and more intense, even though the hero asked him not to pay attention to it. Meanwhile, in the cramped room, Yukun tearfully asked the demoness to stop shaking like an aspen leaf, because it created unnecessary noise, but she couldn't help it, because the object of her adoration was too close. At one point, the mage thought his friend was ill at all, but received a negative response and a request to go first to the bathhouse. Meanwhile, the demon lord knew she had an obligation to pull herself together and stop making noise, but the closer she was to Yukun, the more she thought about it, the more she began to tremble. Suddenly, noticing that something strange was happening to her, the young hero gently put his arm around her shoulders and pressed her against his untrained body. Truth be told, the guy had no idea what they were going to do now, but the demoness was only thinking about his voice near her ear, his warmth, and the scent that enveloped her entire body. Atto decided he'd better go for a walk, though today the hero was acting weirder than usual. Though where weirder is the question. Not even 6 months later, the mage left the room. Yukun was the first to look out the door to see if his friend was deceiving him. It turned out the horizon was clear. He was greatly relieved that they had managed to get rid of the mage. Only at that moment, the demoness lost consciousness and began to fall. And if he hadn't picked her up, she would have fallen to the floor and hurt. The young man was trying to figure out what was wrong with the demon lord. Though, come to think of it, there was something wrong with her all the time. In truth, she almost burned with embarrassment and other feelings. After the guy moved the girl from his room, he met up with Atto and informed him that after he took a bath, he would go straight home. The demon lord he had unconsciously placed on the sofa in the foyer, where she was found by her subordinates, who had already assembled teams and were preparing to begin the ping-pong competition. The vacation at the hot springs ended and the protagonist returned to the castle. It was summer and the weather was abnormally hot. So the demoness was suffering, and it seemed to her that a little more heat and she would die. It was so hot that she couldn't concentrate on important matters. The only thing that was constant was thoughts of the young hero. Nothing could stop that. The demon lord fantasized a lot of different things to herself. Here's Yukun catching her hat. Here he's eating ice cream with her. And here he's holding her hand tightly at a summer festival, making sure she doesn't get lost in the crowd. Nevertheless, it was so hot that fantasies were followed by real visions. It seemed to reach out and touch the idol. The demon lord was happy now, as she could see her loved one in a vision, but in fact he had personally come to her and was ready to end all her suffering in a way well known to all. The girl came to herself quickly. It was worth the young hero to lower, or rather stab, even a sword into the ground in front of her beautiful face. From such a thing, everyone will come to his senses and come to life. The demoness was happy to see Yukun, as he hadn't come to see her in a while. He felt a slight pang of annoyance at having missed a bit. Truth be told, the demoness was very bored. It even seemed to her that the hero had forgotten about her, but he didn't listen to her, thinking about the fact that he needed to be more attentive and aim better so he wouldn't miss. Suddenly, something in her changed, and the girl asked no, even fearfully ordered the young man not to come near her a single step more. Except that she was not afraid of death as such at the hands of her lover, but asked the guy not to come near her, as she was very sweaty and smelled bad. But then a little magic, and she smells like a spring violet again, and she's even ready to hug Yukun, who she's kept waiting for so long. while he's threatening to kill her as usual. But now strange things were happening to the guy. He was angry because for some reason he couldn't even hold his sword properly, so he threw it on the floor. The thing was that it was very hot in the castle. Deadly hot because the cooling system was broken, so the guy started to undress a little so as not to go crazy from the heat. Anyway, he couldn't even think properly under such circumstances, not to mention fight. But noticing the fact that the protagonist takes off his clothes leisurely, or rather even very hastily, the demoness asked him not to do so. It took her a couple minutes to run to her room, grab her camera, come back, and film such a unique moment. The guy, on the other hand, didn't realize who would procrastinate in such a situation. The guy's condition, on the other hand, got worse due to the heat. Even his head started to spin. The demoness tried to think of a way to cool his body. Suddenly, the demoness remembered that she had ice cream with different flavors and could eat it, and then it would get easier, except that Yukun still wanted to fight her, but he didn't have the strength to do so.